There is a moment that happens so quickly most people never even notice it. A moment when you feel accused, doubted or questioned, and without thinking you move into defense. You start to explain, you start to justify, you start to correct what has been said about you. Because deep down you think if you just make yourself clear, the misunderstanding will vanish. It feels noble. It feels honest. It feels like the right thing to do. But what you do not see is that the very act of defending yourself is the trap. Machiavelli understood this long before the modern world. He saw that the second you try to explain, you admit something very dangerous without even realizing it. You admit that the other person has the authority to judge you. You admit their frame is valid. You admit that you are now playing on their field. And once you are on their field, you cannot win. Think about the times you have seen this happen in public. A leader accused of arrogance rushes to explain how humble he really is. A man accused of dishonesty lists all the reasons he has always been truthful. A woman accused of selfishness insists on telling her side, insisting people do not understand her real intentions. On the surface, these sound reasonable. They sound like clarity. But what is the effect on the crowd watching? Do they suddenly believe the explanation? Do they suddenly feel convinced? Rarely. What actually happens is the opposite. The more you explain, the more guilty you appear. The more you justify, the more people think there must be something to the accusation. And the harder you try to clear your name, the weaker you look. Machiavelli's cold insight was that defense is not strength, it is surrender. Because when you defend, you lower yourself. You place yourself beneath the accuser. You are now reacting to them, not commanding them. And in power games, perception is everything. The one who defends is already seen as wounded, already seen as smaller, already seen as someone desperate to be understood. The one who refuses to defend, on the other hand, radiates mystery, radiates confidence, radiates control. When you do not defend yourself, people may not immediately know the truth, but they feel something far more important than truth. They feel presence. They see that you are not rattled, not provoked, not desperate to explain. And in that silence, in that calm refusal to fight on their terms, something begins to shift. The accuser starts to look more emotional. The crowd begins to sense imbalance. The one who attacks looks unstable. The one who remains still looks untouchable. That is the shift Machiavelli saw, and it is the reason he warned against the trap of defense. The real cost of defense is not the words you say, it is the power you lose. Because power is not about truth, it is about who controls the frame. And once you defend, you no longer control anything. You handed them the leash, you told them they had the right to judge you. You gave them exactly what they wanted, and in that instant, without even noticing, you lost. Power has very little to do with truth, and almost everything to do with the frame through which people see the truth. Most people make the mistake of believing that if they can just argue well enough, if they can just present enough facts, if they can just show how wrong the other side is, then the truth will win. But life does not work that way, because people do not see raw truth. They see truth through a frame, and whoever sets the frame controls the outcome. This is the law of the frame, and it is one of the most dangerous things Machiavelli understood. When someone accuses you or questions you, they are not just making a statement, they are trying to pull you into their frame. The second you defend yourself, you accept that frame. You are now answering their charge, you are now playing their game, and you are already a step behind. Imagine a courtroom where the prosecutor speaks first, painting a vivid picture of you as guilty. If you rush to defend, the jury is already locked inside the prosecutor's story, and every word you say feels like a struggle to climb out. That is what happens in life when you accept someone else's framing. But there is another option, and it is the option that creates power. When you refuse to defend, when you do not step inside their frame, you leave a void. That void is uncomfortable. Human beings hate silence. They hate uncertainty. Sooner or later, someone else will step in to fill it. And often, it is the crowd itself that starts to defend you. Not because you asked them to, but because your refusal to enter the frame makes the attack look unbalanced. Think of a time you have seen this happen. A person gets insulted in public, and instead of snapping back or explaining, they stay calm, even detached. The room shifts. The accuser starts to look emotional. The crowd begins to wonder why the accused is so composed. Slowly, the silence becomes power, because now people are not asking, is the accusation true? They are asking, why is he not reacting? What does he know that we don't? That is the power of refusing the frame. This is why silence, stillness, and detachment are not weaknesses. They are weapons. They change the direction of energy. They force the accuser to explain more, to push harder, to look unstable. And the more they do, the more the room turns against them. You have said nothing, but the frame has flipped. The attacker is now on trial. You are the one being silently defended. Machiavelli knew that people do not defend you because you beg them to. They defend you because your presence makes them feel they must. When you remain calm, they see injustice in the attack. When you hold stillness, they project strength onto you. And when you refuse to step inside someone else's story, they begin to write one for you, one where you look untouchable. That is the law of the frame. And once you master it, you stop chasing truth and start commanding perception. Silence is not empty. It is not weakness. It is one of the sharpest weapons a person can carry, because silence does something words can never do. It creates uncertainty. People expect you to reply, they expect you to explain, they expect you to fight back. And when you don't, when you remain still and say nothing, you create a gap that their minds cannot leave alone. They begin to imagine what you could say, what you might reveal, what you must be holding back. And imagination is always stronger than explanation. A single quiet moment can carry more weight than hours of argument, because silence lets people build their own story, and most of the time, they build it in your favor. Think of the times you have seen this play out. Someone hurls an insult, everyone leans forward waiting for the response, but instead of defending, the accused just sits there calmly, maybe with the smallest of smiles, maybe with no expression at all. Suddenly the room feels heavier. The accuser shifts in their chair, repeats themselves, grows louder, because silence makes them doubt their own words. They start to look emotional, unstable, even desperate, while the one who stayed silent now looks strong. That is the shift, the invisible turning of the room, and it happens not because of what was said, but because of what was not. Silence works because it reverses pressure. The attacker thinks they are putting the spotlight on you, but by refusing to react, you leave them standing under it alone. Every second you don't speak is a second they start to wonder if they made a mistake. Did they go too far? Did they embarrass themselves? Are they the only one who looks emotional now? And the longer the silence stretches, the more people around begin to feel the same. The crowd does not see calmness as weakness. They see calmness as confidence. They see restraint as strength. They see the one who refuses to explain as the one in control. Machiavelli understood that silence is not passive, it is active. It is not retreat, it is attack. Because the more you say nothing, the more others are forced to reveal themselves. The accuser repeats their point, exposes their insecurity, grows more unstable with each attempt. And the people watching, they begin to defend you without you asking. They whisper that you didn't deserve that. They wonder why you are so composed. They create an image of you that is bigger, stronger, more dangerous than anything you could have explained. Words can be twisted, but silence cannot. Words put you on the same level as your attacker, but silence lifts you above them. And when you train yourself to use silence not as escape but as strategy, you stop being the one under attack and become the one who controls the room. That is the weapon of silence, and it cuts deeper than anything spoken. When you are attacked, the natural urge is to defend yourself, to make your case, to explain why the accusation is wrong. But the strange truth is that when you resist that urge, when you remain calm and let the words pass without reaction, something far more powerful happens. People around you feel the imbalance. They see someone attacking, and they see you not fighting back. And because human beings hate what feels unfair, they begin to lean toward you. They begin to feel the need to defend you, even though you never asked them to. That is the hidden gift of absence. When you don't fight your own battles, others feel compelled to fight them for you. This happens because of a simple law of human nature. People do not like to see someone pushed when they do not push back. It makes the attacker look cruel, and it makes the quiet one look dignified. The more composed you are, the more it unsettles the room, and the more people want to balance the scales. They begin to step into the space you left empty, They start making excuses for you. They start pushing back at the one who attacked you. They start explaining what you never had to say. What you gave them was silence, but what they give you back is loyalty. Think about the times you have seen this play out. Someone is mocked or insulted in a group, and instead of lashing out, they remain calm, almost indifferent. At first, the room is tense, waiting for a reaction, but when none comes, people start to shift. Someone speaks up saying that was too harsh, someone else adds that it was uncalled for. Soon the crowd itself has turned into a shield. Without lifting a finger, without saying a word, the quiet one has gained defenders. Not because they demanded it, but because their restraint made others feel they must act. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. He knew that power does not always come from direct force. Sometimes it comes from the absence of force. Sometimes the strongest move is to do nothing, because the silence itself awakens action in others. When you refuse to fight for yourself, people begin to believe you do not need to, and that belief makes them step in. They carry the fight while you remain untouchable. Absence creates space, and in that space, loyalty grows. People do not admire those who panic and defend themselves with endless explanations. They admire those who remain calm under fire. They admire those who do not flinch, and admiration naturally turns into protection. By not fighting, you give them the chance to prove themselves on your behalf. You allow them to take the role of defender, and when they do, they bond with you more deeply than if you had fought for yourself. The irony is clear. The more you defend yourself, the fewer allies you gain, but the more you refuse to defend, the more allies appear. That is the paradox of power, and it is why absence is never just absence. It is a magnet, pulling loyalty toward you, creating allies out of silence. Machiavelli's coldest move was not silence alone, it was inversion. Instead of meeting an attack with defense, he would let the words bend back on the one who spoke them. This is not about clever comebacks or quick wit. It is about holding a mirror so that the attack reveals more about the accuser than the accused. When someone calls you manipulative, most people would rush to say they are not. They would try to prove their honesty. They would argue about intentions. But inversion is different. You do not explain, you do not justify. You let the word hang in the air and allow everyone to notice what it really means. Often it says more about the one who used it than about you. If they see manipulation, it may be because they are easily influenced. If they see arrogance, it may be because they are uncomfortable with confidence. If they see coldness, it may be because they expected warmth you never promised. The more you resist the urge to explain, the clearer their insecurity becomes. The brilliance of inversion is that it makes the attack collapse under its own weight. Imagine someone saying, "You are so arrogant," in a crowded room. If you argue, you confirm the tone of the moment. But if you remain still, maybe with a calm glance or a faint smile, the weight shifts. Now the room does not see you fighting for approval. They see the accuser struggling to prove something. They look bitter, they look envious, they look small. Without saying a word, you made their insult about them. The crowd begins to think, why did they feel the need to say that? What does it reveal about them? The energy flips, and suddenly the one who threw the stone is the one on trial. Inversion works because people reveal themselves in their attacks. When someone calls you selfish, they may be the one who feels entitled. When they call you cold, they may be the one who needs validation. When they call you fake, it often comes from disappointment that you no longer serve their expectations. The insult is not really about you, it is a window into their mind. Machiavelli understood that the wise man lets that window stay open. He does not close it with explanations. He lets the world look in and see the weakness behind the words. The more you practice inversion, the less you need to speak at all. A calm silence, a steady look, a neutral nod, all of these say more than any defense ever could. And if you choose to respond, the best lines are short, detached, and cold. Strange that confidence bothers you so much. Interesting that you see it that way. These are not defenses, they are subtle turns of the blade, making the other person's words cut back into them. The real power of inversion is that it leaves your accuser scrambling to explain. They feel exposed, so they start clarifying, backtracking, repeating themselves, and the more they do, the weaker they appear. You never fought, yet they collapsed. That is the art of inversion. The move Machiavelli knew would always belong to the one who refuses to defend, because the one who inverts always walks away untouchable. There are times when silence is the strongest move, but there are also moments when silence alone leaves too much space for noise to grow. In those moments, you do not defend, you do not explain, you do not lower yourself into a debate. Instead, you deliver a single phrase, short and sharp, like a blade that cuts the argument in half. These phrases are not meant to win a discussion, they are meant to end it. They do not carry the weight of explanation, they carry the weight of finality. When spoken calmly, without tension in your voice or body, they do something silence cannot always do. They show the room that you have spoken, but on your terms only. Think of someone accusing you of arrogance in a meeting. The average person would rush into denial, insisting they are not arrogant, insisting their confidence is misunderstood. But the one who holds power does not do that. He leans back, meets the gaze, and says simply, "If that is how you see it." No fire, no protest, no defense. The entire weight shifts in that moment. The accuser now has to deal with the awkward silence that follows. They look like they were reaching for drama and found none. The phrase ended the fight before it began. Another example is when someone tries to provoke you by calling you selfish or cold. Instead of giving them your reasons, instead of listing all the ways you are not selfish, you reply with one line, "Noted." Just that, nothing more. It does not fuel the fire, it does not invite another round of attacks. It closes the door. The room feels it. The attack is no longer a scene, it is an echo dying out. The person who threw it looks like they were trying too hard. You look unbothered. Sometimes the strongest use of these phrases is not just to end the game, but to expose the emotional tone of the other person. When someone comes at you with exaggerated energy, throwing accusations or insults, a calm phrase like "strange thing to be emotional about" makes them shrink in an instant. You are not fighting, you are not defending, you are holding up a mirror that shows the room who really lost control. They wanted you to react, but instead you made their reaction the subject. That one line turns the energy back onto them, and now they are scrambling to explain themselves. The reason these phrases work is because they are not arguments, they are not attempts at being understood, they are dismissals. They tell the other person, "Your words are not important enough to demand my energy." They create a sense of distance, and distance creates power. The crowd watching will always feel it, because the shortness of your reply compared to the length of the attack highlights just how calm you are and just how unstable the other person looks. Machiavelli knew that sometimes silence wins, but sometimes a single phrase does more. Not a speech, not an explanation, not a defense, but a cut. A clean, calm, precise cut that ends the game instantly, leaving no doubt about who controlled the frame. Here is the secret that most people never learn in their lives. People do not actually judge the truth of an accusation. They judge the balance of power in the room. They are not as concerned with whether the words are correct as they are with who looks stronger, who looks calmer, and who looks in control. This is why the one who stays calm always comes out ahead, and the one who grows desperate always collapses. It has less to do with facts and more to do with perception. The crowd does not care about evidence. The crowd cares about energy. When someone attacks you and you react quickly, explaining yourself, raising your voice, trying to correct every detail, the crowd does not think you are right, they think you are rattled. They sense that you are losing your ground. But if you stay calm, if you sit back, if you let the words float in the air without rushing to fight them, everything shifts. The accuser begins to look like the only emotional one in the room. The crowd senses the imbalance. They see one person composed and one person unraveling. And because people always lean towards strength, they begin to side with you even if you never said a word. This is why silence and stillness are so powerful in social battles. It is not about being passive, it is about showing restraint that makes the other side look unstable. The longer you remain still, the more the pressure builds on the accuser. They start repeating themselves, they start raising their tone, they start looking around for validation. And when the crowd does not immediately echo them, panic sets in. Slowly the conversation turns, and without anyone saying it out loud, the focus shifts. You are no longer the one on trial, they are. Their words become less about you and more about why they are so eager, why they are so desperate, why they cannot let go. Think of the times you have witnessed this happen. In a meeting, someone takes a jab at another person, expecting a defensive reaction, but instead, the target stays calm and collected. At first, the room is silent, waiting, but as the attacker continues to push, the energy changes. People begin to think, why is he so focused on tearing him down? What is driving this? Soon, the accuser looks bitter, jealous, unstable. The crowd is no longer judging the original statement. They are judging the balance of power, and they see clearly who is stronger. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that people rarely seek truth. They seek safety, and they side with whoever appears safest to stand beside. Calmness looks safe, stillness looks strong, anger looks unstable, desperation looks weak. The crowd effect works in silence, and it is one of the most powerful tools you will ever use. When you refuse to flinch, you do not just protect yourself, you turn the crowd into your shield. They do the judging for you, and they always end up turning on the one who looks desperate. Most people spend their lives chasing a good reputation. They want to be liked, to be seen as agreeable, to have their name cleared of any doubt. So when they are accused or questioned, they rush to explain themselves, thinking that if they just speak enough, if they just clarify enough, people will believe them. And yes, this can create a reputation that looks clean, but it is also a reputation that looks soft. It is the kind of reputation that can be shaken by the next rumor, the next insult, the next person who decides to question you. A good reputation is fragile because it rests on the endless effort of defending it. Machiavelli knew that the stronger path was not in defending yourself, but in refusing to do so. Because when you stop explaining, you stop playing their game. And in that stillness, something far more powerful begins to grow. Silence does not build a good reputation, it builds a strong one. It builds the kind of reputation that makes people cautious about challenging you, not because they think you are innocent, but because they cannot read you. Silence leaves space for imagination, and the imagination of others almost always makes you bigger, stronger, and more untouchable than you actually are. When you never explain yourself, you create an aura. People begin to assume you must be confident, you must be secure, you must know something they do not. That aura does more for you than any long speech or defense could, because people respect the image they have created of you more than the words you could ever say about yourself. Think about the difference between someone who constantly tries to clear their name and someone who never bothers to respond. The first may be liked, but they will never be feared. They will never be untouchable. They will always look like someone who can be dragged down into petty arguments. The second, the one who never explains, will always seem above reproach. Even if people do not fully trust them, they hesitate before speaking against them. They wonder why he is so calm, why he never reacts, what kind of strength lies behind that silence. It is this hesitation that becomes power. Your aura is louder than your words. Every time you resist the urge to explain, you add another stone to the fortress of your reputation. People begin to whisper that you cannot be rattled, that you do not lower yourself, that you stand above the noise. And slowly, your image transforms from one that needs defending to one that defends itself. That is the difference between being seen as good and being seen as untouchable. One earns temporary approval, the other commands lasting respect. The truth is, you do not need to be liked to win. You do not need to be seen as good. You only need to be seen as beyond reach. And that only happens when you never stoop to justify, when you never waste breath on the small voices trying to pull you down. In the end, silence is not the absence of defense. It is the highest form of defense because it creates an aura that shields you better than words ever could. The final stage is not about silence as a tactic. It is about silence as an identity. There comes a point when you no longer even think in terms of whether you should defend yourself, whether you should respond, whether you should let an attack pass or answer it with a phrase. You reach a place where defense does not exist in your world because nothing touches you deeply enough to require one. Your stillness stops being an act and becomes who you are. People begin to feel it before you speak. A presence that is heavier than words, an energy that does not bend to attacks or questions. That presence is what grows into aura, and aura is the stage where perception turns into myth. When you arrive at this level, something strange begins to happen. People do not attack you as often, not because you fought them off in the past, but because they know it will not land. They know that no matter what they say, you will not flinch, you will not move, and their effort will look like desperation. Attacks lose their value before they are even made, and even if someone does try, the crowd does not wait for you to respond. They respond for you. They step in not because you begged them to, not because you argued your innocence, but because they feel you are above judgment. They believe you should not have to lower yourself, so they take the role of defenders without you ever asking. That is the end game. You move from defending yourself to being defended by others, to needing no defense at all. Machiavelli understood that the greatest power is not in being right, but in being untouchable. When you live in explanation, you tie yourself to the opinions of others. When you live in silence, you cut that tie. But when you live in aura, you transcend it completely. You do not just ignore judgment, you rise above the very idea that you could be judged. Your presence commands respect without you ever demanding it. People hesitate before speaking against you, not out of fear of your words, but out of fear of their own weakness being exposed by your calmness. This aura does not come from force. It comes from discipline. It comes from choosing stillness over reaction again and again until it becomes natural. It comes from refusing to explain yourself, even when your ego screams for it. It comes from letting others waste their breath while you conserve yours. Over time, that restraint hardens into presence, and presence hardens into myth. You stop being seen as someone who wins arguments. You are seen as someone who cannot be placed inside one. The untouchable aura is the final reward for mastering the art of not defending yourself. It is when silence no longer feels like strategy, but feels like truth. It is when your existence itself is the defense and everything else collapses in front of it. That is Machiavelli's guide to making people defend you without asking, and once you step into it, you will never need to step down again. Maybe this video helped you see yourself or someone you know in a different way. Feel free to let us know via a like or in the comments. And if you want more wisdom and guidance in becoming a better version of yourself, subscribe now. This is the moment to start becoming the person you really want to be.